What's going on, college basketball fans? Today we have a brand new Joe Lunardi Bracketology updated February 21st today, and you guys know what that means. We are going to take his bracketology, put it into our own personal bracket that we made here on PDF, and we are going to fill it out from the first round all the way to the national championship, and we are going to have these bracket predictions out every single week now that we are getting really close to March Madness. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button if you guys have not already, because not only are we going to have these out weekly, but we have daily college basketball and March Madness coverage here on the channel. You don't want to miss it. So hit that like button if you guys enjoy, and comment down below who are your favorites to win the national championship this season. So let's get it started. Our first game, we do have one-seeded Alabama going up against FDU or Morehead State in the first four, or in the last four in game. I decided to go with FDU to defeat Morehead State in that game and go on to the round of 68 or to the round of 64 to face the Alabama Crimson Tide. So I got Alabama winning this one. I don't think they're going to lose to FDU. Alabama's just too good. A lot of really good guards on that team, and I got Bama moving on to the next round. Next up, we got 8-seeded NC State going up against 9-seeded Memphis. This is a really good matchup. NC State has a really good backcourt, one of the most underrated and maybe one of the best overall backcourts in the country, which is very important once you get to March Madness. But Memphis has a really good point guard themselves in Kendrick Davis, and they have another really good player down low who is a force down low in DeAndre Williams, and they also have some injuries. If they can get those players back and healthy, I think Memphis are a low-key pick to go far in this year's tournament. So I am going to have Memphis defeat NC State here in the first round and move on to face Alabama. Next up, we do have Kent State going up against Indiana now. Or no, we have Kent State going up against Creighton, my fault, in the 5 versus 12 matchup. Now, I really do like Kent State to be a potential team that could pull off an upset this year in March Madness, but I don't know if I can pull the trigger on them going up against Creighton. Creighton is a really solid team. They have one of the best starting fives in the country, and I think they're going to be too much. I think they're going to be one of those teams that turn up during March Madness, and I'm not going to have them lose first round to Kent State. I got Creighton moving on to the round of 32. And next up, we do have Indiana going up against 13-seeded Yale. If you guys have watched my previous bracket predictions, you guys know that I am not high on the Ivy League this year. I think it's going to be either Yale or Princeton coming out of that league, and I don't think either one of them are going to get a win in March unless they get a really good draw in the bracket, and I'm going to have Indiana defeat Yale and move on. Indiana has been playing really good as of late, and TJD has been playing like one of the best, if not the best player in the country. I got Indiana here moving on. Next up, we do have 6-seeded TCU going up against 11-seeded Nevada. And Nevada, a very, very solid team and a scrappy team. And I actually had them winning the last 4 in-game against Mississippi State. I think that Nevada-Mississippi State last 4 in-game would be a very close defensive scrappy game, but I decided to have Nevada come out of that one. I think it's going to be hard for Nevada. When you play against TCU, you cannot turn the ball over. This is the best fast break transition offensive team in the country, and TCU will make you pay for your turnovers and mistakes. And although I think Nevada can do that, even then, Mike Miles, Damian Ball, Shahada Wells, these are really good guards that have in my opinion, TCU, they don't have that good of a history in basketball. This might be the best roster in TCU basketball history, and I have them moving on to the second round. So next up, we do have Virginia going up against the toothpaste themselves in Colgate. Colgate sitting here at a 14 seed just like last year. And I'm not going to lie, Colgate has made the tournament, the last few years. I think this is their third year in a row now making it. And this might be the weakest Colgate team of the past few years. Honestly, I don't know if they can get it done. But I also don't really trust Virginia sitting there as a 3 seed. They play in a lot of close games, but I think when Virginia loses, it's not going to be to one of these lower seeds. I think when they do get caught, it will be around the round of 32 or the Sweet 16. So I'm going to have Virginia get past them, and it might be a little bit close, a little bit too close for comfort for Cavalier fans, but I am going to have UVA move on. Next up, we do have Illinois going up against FAU in the first round. Now, this is a really fun 7-10 matchup. FAU has been one of the best mid-major teams all season long, and Illinois, they were really good at the start of the year. They've just been inconsistent as of late. Can they get past this really good Florida Atlantic team? I'm not sure. I think it's going to depend. In my opinion, Matt Mayer is the X factor. If Matt Mayer plays every game like he did against Texas, like he did against Indiana, I know they lost to Indiana, but he played really good in that game. If he's playing that good, Terrence Shannon Jr. is playing good, Coleman Hawkins is playing good, this Illinois team has potential to make it to the second weekend of March. And I don't know if I can pull the trigger on this. I'm going to do it, though. I'm going to take Illinois to do it, and I really do like this FAU team, but I'm actually going to put some trust into a team that I really don't like to put trust into, and that is the Fighting Illini. They've let me down in past March Madness years whenever I picked them to go far in my bracket, but I'm going to have Illinois make it to the next round. Next up, we do have UCLA going up against Kennesaw State. And Kennesaw State actually a pretty solid team there, but I think UCLA is a team like Virginia. I don't see them losing early on, but around the second, third round, they could be vulnerable to getting picked off. So I am going to have UCLA move on to the second round. Let's head over to our right region, where we do have Houston as our top seed going up against 16-seeded Texas A&M Corpus Christi. How about Corpus Christi making their second tournament in a row? That would be awesome to see. But I am going to have Houston defeat them. Houston's just too good of a team, man, and I don't see them going down to a 16 seed. They're one of my championship favorites. Give me Houston to move on. Next up, we go from Corpus Christi's Texas A&M to just normal Texas A&M, where they will face 9-seeded Rutgers. And this is a tough one for me. I think both of these teams have potential, to be a pretty decent sleeper team come March Madness. But I am going to go with Texas A&M, even though I feel like Rutgers might be the better overall team. They're a really good defensive team. Texas A&M has shown so much more consistency this season than Rutgers. Rutgers is always like win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 1, lose 2, win 1. Like, they're just not consistent. Texas A&M all the way through SEC play have been playing amazingly, and I'm going to trust them right here to pull off the win in the 8-9 matchup. Next up, we do have 5-seeded Miami going up against 12-seeded Drake, and I will mention before in our first region over here in the top left region, the top seeds are really top heavy in this one, so I think I'm pretty sure I chalked that first round, but trust me, this whole bracket is not going to be chalk. I also feel like that not the 12 seeds being weak, but the 5 seeds are really strong this year. I mean, Creighton, Miami, I'm looking down at UConn and St. Mary's. Like, these are strong 5 seeds that all have potential to make runs. And I do like this Drake team. I think given the right matchup, they could get a win in March Madness, but I can't do it. I think Miami's too good there with Jordan Miller, Nigel Pack, Isaiah Wong, of course. They got a lot of scorers on that team, and I can't pick Miami, or I can't pick Drake to lose. To defeat Miami. But next up, we do have Marquette going up against 13-seeded Southern Mississippi, and this Southern Miss is another team like Drake. I could see pulling off an upset in the first round. Whoever comes out of the Sun Belt, whether it's Southern Miss, Marshall, or Louisiana, I think they have upset potential in the first round to pull one off, but I just think Marquette is too good, man. They have really good guards and Tyler Kolek and Cam Jones. That's what you look for in teams to make runs in March Madness and at least win a game or two. Is really good guard play, and I think Marquette, they're another team also like TCU. They like to force a lot of turnovers, get a lot of transition buckets, and I don't know if Southern Miss is going to be able to handle that, so I'm going to have Marquette move on to the next round. If I could spell it, there we go. Next up, we have San Diego State going up against USC. I had USC winning the last 4 games in over Wisconsin, and I think USC-Wisconsin would be an amazing matchup to determine who makes it to the round of 64, but I am going to have San Diego State University move on to the next round. I love their guard play. They have 3 solid guards on their team, including Matt Bradley, who is one of my favorite players at the mid-major level. Love his game, and San Diego State is a defensive scrappy team. That's another thing you look for when it comes to teams being able to make a run. If they have scrappy defense and also really good guard play, and San Diego State has both. Next up, we do have Kansas State versus UC Irvine, and this is like deja vu. Do you guys remember it? Back in 2019, UC Irvine pulled off an upset over Kansas State in March Madness, and right now I'm feeling like Kansas State gets their revenge and defeats UC Irvine, and I am very high on UC Irvine after this past week, and I wanted them to pull off this upset again. I'm not gonna lie, I really did want them to, but UC Irvine, they just beat UC Santa Barbara, who I was high on, and then they've been on fire as of late. So look out for UC Irvine. I don't like the matchup against Kansas State. Like if Irvine was playing against Virginia, I think I would definitely take Irvine in that one. But Kansas State, I'm going to have them get past and get a revenge game over being upset by UC Irvine last time. Next game we do have here is Michigan State going up against Missouri. And this one is tough because I think that Missouri matches up with Michigan State really well, actually. Like, really well. They have a lot of really good guards that they are going to be able to, move the ball around really well. Michigan State, where they're going to have to win is probably through Joey Hauser and Sissoko down low, and they could do that. And I think Tom Izzo, it's hard to pick against him in the first round of March because he's going to have a really good game plan. I also really like first-year head coach Dennis Gates there at Missouri. So this one is actually very close for me, but it's hard for me to pick against Tom Izzo in March, so I am going to go with Michigan State to pull off the win in round 1. Next up, I do have Texas here versus Youngstown State, our 2 versus our 15 seed, and I know I have said in past bracket predictions videos that I don't think we are going to see a 15 over a 2, and I do think that Texas is going to be tough for any 15 seed to beat just because they have really good guard play in Marcus Carr and Tyrese Hunter, and they also have really athletic bigs that are just going to be able to out-athlete a lot of these players like from a Youngstown State. But Youngstown State is a really good team. They had a really good week, and I'm kind of feeling the Penguins right now, and I think it is possible that Texas does lose to someone early, so I am going to have Youngstown State pull off the 15 over a 2, and we get one for the 3rd season in a row. So a big time upset here in round number 1. 15-2. Youngstown State, in my opinion, is a very strong 15 seed right now. And Texas, they could be vulnerable if they have an off shooting night. If Tyrese Hunter and Marcus Carr, aren't with it a little bit, I could see Texas losing early. And we've seen Texas lose early before to teams that we thought they would for sure beat. But I'm going to rock with Youngstown State to pull off this win. So let's go ahead and go down to our next region, where we do have Purdue versus either Howard University or Morehead State. I'm going to have Morehead State win that game in the last 4 in-game, and then, of course, I am going to have Purdue be able to pull off that win and move on to the next round. Next up, we do have Kentucky versus 9-seeded Pitt. And that would actually be a really fun matchup. I don't think Pitt has anyone that is going to be able to slow down Oscar Tshiebwe. But then again, I didn't think that they would have anyone to slow down guys like Armando Bacot, and then they swept North Carolina. But I do believe that Kentucky, they have potential to maybe turn up during March Madness and win a game or two in March. They definitely have the squad and athletes to be able to do so, but can they put it all together before we get to the tourney? And honestly, I'm going to trust John Calipari over Jeff Capel 10 out of 10 times. I'm going to take Kentucky in this matchup. It's already a 50-50 matchup, and looking at the coaching there, I'm going to go with the Kentucky Wildcats in this one. Next up, we do have 5-seeded UConn going up against 12-seeded West Virginia. And you guys know I'm a West Virginia fan, and West Virginia is a team I could potentially see going far. And it's tough here for me, but I'm still really high on UConn. I think once they get to March Madness, it's going to be a different story, and they have a roster that could still, if they're playing their absolute best, win the championship. I still believe that, and I'm going to have UConn get past my boys, the Mountaineers, here in round 1. I think they have too much size. West Virginia actually could give them some trouble because they do have some really good bigs on that team that could defend, but I think I'm going to go with UConn here to get past them in round number 1. Next up, I do have Gonzaga. We do have Gonzaga here as our 4 seed going up against 13-seeded Iona. Iona getting back in the tournament. We all know they are coached there by Rick Pitino, so that would be a really fun matchup to see him versus Mark Few there at Gonzaga. And honestly, I could see this upset right here happening. Gonzaga, they do have really good bigs that include Drew Timme, and I could see Gonzaga going on a deep run this year, and I could also see Gonzaga losing in the first round this season. But I'm going to trust Gonzaga here to move on and get to the second round of the tourney. Next up, we do have Duke going up against Oklahoma State. Now, this is a fun matchup, and immediately when I saw it, I was thinking I'm going to pick Oklahoma State in this matchup, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take Oklahoma State because they have some really good veteran players on that team that include guys like Avery Anderson, Caleb Boone, and Bryce Thompson. They have some really good players on that team, and whenever they come to play defensively, they are a really good defensive team, and I don't know if Duke can win this game, 100%, but with all those freshmen, I don't know. I think Oklahoma State, I like them in this matchup, and immediately when I saw it, I liked them. I'm taking the Pokes to move on to round number 2 and upset Duke in round 1. Next up, we do have Tennessee going up against Hofstra in the first round. Hofstra getting in over Charleston. So given this scenario right here, That would mean Hofstra defeated Charleston College again and won their league to get into the tournament. So I don't know, Hofstra, they're a pretty decent team, and Tennessee I do not trust at all. Their offensive efficiency rating is not that good. I think they're not even top 50, not even top 60, and they do have really good defense, but that's probably the type of game Hofstra would want to play against a 3 seed. A defensive game might mean it's a little bit closer for comfort for the Volunteers, and I am going to take Hofstra to defeat Tennessee in the first round. So that means in the second round we have an 11 versus a 14 seed matched up, and that would be great to see. One of them's making the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have Providence going up against Auburn in our 7 versus 10 seed. Now, this is a good matchup, a really good matchup, and I think this one would go down to the wire. This one would be like a must-see game for me, because I almost feel like this game is 100% either going to overtime or getting a buzzer beater win, or both. And Providence as a 7 seed, the front court matchups is really what I'm looking at here. You got guys like Johnny Broome going up against Bryce Hopkins. That would be great to see. I think overall though, I like Providence players. I think they have better shot makers on their team than Auburn. So I'm going to go with the Friars here to pick up the victory. Next up, we do have Baylor going up against the Vermont Caramounts. And you guys, if you guys are longtime watchers of the channel, you guys know the past few years I have really liked the Caramounts, and this is like the third tournament they're making in a row, assuming they get in. But a lot like Colgate, I think this Vermont team is a little bit weaker than past years, and Baylor is a hot team. I know they just lost to Kansas, but Baylor's a really good team. They got 3 NBA guards on their team. I don't know if they're losing to Vermont. Give me Baylor to move on. So, last region, we have our bottom right one, and we got Kansas as our 1 seed going up against UNC Asheville. I will say UNC Asheville, probably the strongest 16 seed in the March Madness tournament right now. I would say they are the strongest, so look out for them. If Asheville can get to a 15 or a 14, look out for them to maybe pull off an upset. But against Kansas, I just don't see it happening. Kansas is so too good. They're on fire right now at the perfect time. Give me Kansas to move on right here. Next up, we do have Iowa as our 8 seed going up against Arkansas as our 9 seed, and this one is probably the easiest 8-9 matchup I've seen. I'm taking Arkansas 100%. Iowa is a team that always chokes in the March Madness tournament, and Arkansas, as of recent years, they've made back-to-back Elite Eights, and they've been playing really good in March as of late under head coach Eric Musselman. I trust Eric Musselman much more than I do Coach Fran. Give me Arkansas to move on. I also feel like Chris Murray in big games this year just hasn't been showing up. Like even at Northwestern the other day, Chris Murray was not playing good. I think about the game against Duke in Madison Square Garden. He played, not that great at all. So I don't know about on the big stage if Chris Murray just doesn't show up. And I also feel like Arkansas has a lot of versatile defenders at the forward position that will be able to slow him down or maybe even shut him down completely. And without Chris Murray, I don't think Iowa has enough in them to defeat Arkansas. Give me the Razorbacks to move on. Next up, we do have St. Mary's as our 5 seed going up against VCU as our 12 seed, and I'm not going to lie, I am yet to pick a 12 over a 5, but I mentioned earlier I really don't like the 12 seeds like matchups. I just think the 5 seeds are very strong, but it always happens. And the A10, we've been saying all year, they're a weak league, they're a 1-bid league this year. VCU's been pretty consistent. I'm going to take VCU to pull off the upset over St. Mary's. I think that it could definitely happen. St. Mary's, they have really good guards, and they definitely have potential to go far in the tournament and get to the second weekend. But uh, something about it, man, is making me feel like this VCU team could maybe pull off an upset here over St. Mary's. So I'm going to take Virginia Commonwealth to get the W here. Next up, we do have Xavier going up against Utah Valley here in this one, and 13/4. I could maybe see this happening because Utah Valley, I've been keeping my eye out on them. I still kind of trust in Sam Houston to maybe come out of that league, but Utah Valley is making it really hard for me to say that Sam Houston's going to make it out of that league. And they're actually looking a lot better than I thought. But I do think Xavier, if they do get Zach Fremantle back, they can be dangerous in March. So I am going to take Xavier here to get the victory. Maybe in a little bit closer than a lot of people thought, though. Next up, we do have Northwestern going up against Oral Roberts. And this one is tough because Northwestern's been playing very good as of late. They have good guard play and Boo Buie. But Maxi Buckets on Oral Roberts, they got a 7'5" dude on their team, the transfer from Arkansas. They got some dudes on this Oral Roberts team, and right now, the way they're dominating their league, I don't think they have a single conference loss yet. They're sitting at an 11 seed, and I think right now they would get an at-large bid, and I'm loving that right now for Oral Roberts. I'm taking Oral Roberts over a Big Ten team 100% every time. Every time. Give me Oral Roberts. Next up, we do have Iowa State going up against Eastern Washington. Now, I do think Eastern Washington is probably the weakest 14 seed that I've seen on here so far, and I'm going to take Iowa State for sure. They have really good guards on their team. They're just now getting Kunk back in the lineup as well from his injury, and Osuna Sunny down there as well. They got a really solid team, man. I like Iowa State here in this matchup. Next up, we do have Maryland going up against Boise State in our 7 versus 10 matchup. And Maryland, they catch fire, and if they can catch fire, man, I could see them going pretty far. And I do think that Maryland has a much better team, like all around, than Boise. So I am going to go with Maryland. I think that they move the ball actually pretty well, and they have multiple guys. I think they have like all 5 of their starters score like almost 10 points a game or more. And I think that is going to be huge against a team like Boise State, who really plays a lot better at home and on a neutral site court. I think I'm going to trust Maryland here in this one to pick up the win. Next up, we do have Arizona going up against Samford, the 15 seed, and honestly, Samford seems like a pretty weak 15 seed given the other 3. I'm going to go with Arizona to win this one pretty easily. I mean, they have the Twin Towers on their team in Turbellis and Ballo. Who on Samford is guarding them, right? So we have our second round matchup set here, and first off, we do have Alabama versus Memphis, a rematch from earlier in the season, and this quite the matchup. We've seen it before. Alabama was the home team, and they barely scraped by Memphis. Now on a neutral site court, this one would be played in Louisville, Kentucky, and I am liking Memphis actually in a rematch to get this win and defeat one-seeded. The top overall seed goes down in the round of 32. Memphis pulls off the upset. I think Kendrick Davis, I think he's one of those players he can take over during March Madness. He can get a lot of buckets, and they also have a guy in like DeAndre Williams who would dominate Noah Carter down low. I just feel that way. And Brandon Miller, I could see him having a huge game in this game, and Memphis still pulling off the victory. And I know Bama has some really good guards like Sears, Bradley, Quinterly, but I don't know if they're like defensive enough to be able to stop Kendrick Davis. I like Memphis in this matchup in a rematch from earlier in the season, and Memphis, the 9 seed, making it to the Sweet 16. And the way Memphis played last year, they almost upset Gonzaga, who was a 1 seed last year, in the second round. They play good in March Madness, and I think this team is better than last year's Memphis team. So give me the Tigers to move on. Next up, we do have Creighton versus Indiana in a must-see TV 5 versus 4 matchup. This would be an amazing game down to the wire. I would love to see Trayce Jackson-Davis matched up against a defensive anchor in Ryan Cockburner. That would be so fun to see, but I am actually going to go with Indiana in this matchup. I think that they have the guards to do this when Xavier Johnson gets back. I think his absence was actually a blessing in disguise for this Indiana team, because now the freshman Jalen Hood-Schifino has gotten a lot of experience being like the sole guard, starting guard on that team, and being like the guy on that team at the guard position. And then when Xavier Johnson comes back, it's only going to make his job a lot more easier. And I just like the matchups here for Indiana. I'm going to have them pull this one off in a absolute classic of a game. Would love to see that. Would love to see that matchup. So next up, we do have TCU versus Virginia. Now, I think that this would be an amazing matchup. Like TCU, they like to turn the ball over, get out in transition. That's when they are at their best. And Virginia, it comes in handy that they have a guy in Kihei Clark that, is a veteran guard who doesn't turn the ball over that much. So I like that there for Virginia. And Eddie Lampkin, he could, be playing really good in this game. He has the size advantage, but they have guys on Virginia like Armand Franklin, who I think is the X factor, and also Jaden Clark, who has hit big shots down the stretch of a lot of close games. And Virginia, they play in close games no matter who you face. And I think this is a close one, and I think there is some value into finishing a lot of close games throughout the regular season. You get used to that. And I think Virginia closes out a close game right here and defeats TCU. And TCU is a team that I believe has a potential to make the Final Four this year, but so doesn't Virginia. This is a very good 6 versus 3 matchup that it would be another super fun game. But I am going to take Virginia to move on right here. I just think too good, man, and too good defensively as well. And I also think that Isaac McNeely, the freshman, Vanderplas off the bench, they can hit some big shots down the stretch of the game. Give me Virginia to move on right here. Next up, we do have Illinois going up against UCLA. This is a rematch from earlier in the season where Illinois actually won that matchup, and I could see that potentially happening again. Jamie Yaquez, he has a tough matchup going up against guys like Terrence Shannon Jr. and Matt Mayer, who are really good defenders at the forward position. So I do think Illinois does match up really well against UCLA. The problem I do have here with Illinois is UCLA has the backcourt advantage. They're with Tiger Campbell. They have Clark, they have Amari Bailey. I think they are much better than guys like Eaps on this Illinois team and their guards. So for that reason, I am going to take UCLA to move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have Houston going up against Texas A&M, and this would be a really fun matchup. But I think Marcus Sasser, Jamal Sheed, too much here. I think Jarris Walker could have a big game in this one, and I think Houston actually wins this one pretty big. Battle with Texas. They move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have another 5 versus 4 matchup that could be an absolute classic. Miami going up against Marquette. I would love to see these two backcourts go at it. Miami's Nigel Pack and Isaiah Wong going up against Tyler Kolek and Cam Jones. It would be an amazing matchup. It truly would be an amazing matchup, but I am going to actually go with the Miami Hurricanes to defeat Marquette. I think Norchad Omier going up against guys like Prosper, it all kind of cancels out. This is as close as a 50-50 matchup I can really see. And I just think Miami's going to get it done. Maybe Jordan Miller at the small forward position there is the key to close this one out here for the Hurricanes. So give me Miami to move on 5 over the 4 seed. Next up, we do have San Diego State going up against Kansas State here in this one. I think this one would be an absolute defensive slaughter in this game. It would be crazy. And honestly, I think, Marquise Noel going up against those guards like Matt Bradley, and then that could be tough for him, and it would be an amazing. I actually, this one would be must-see TV. These 3 versus 6 seeds, if we get a chance to watch these, man, they would be amazing, amazing games. And I'm going to go with San Diego State. I'm going to go with Actually, Marquise Noel lobs it to Keontae Johnson for the closer. Kansas State wins this one. Very close game and makes it to the Sweet 16 in Jerome Tang's first year as head coach. Next up, we do have Michigan State going up against Youngstown State, and another super good matchup. And we've seen when 15 seeds build up some momentum, they can go on a little bit of a run. So don't put it past the Penguins to maybe start to turn up once they get a little bit of momentum behind them. Don't be surprised if Youngstown State gets a little bit of momentum behind their hands. They could go on a little bit of a run. This is a senior-led team with a lot of really good seniors. Dwayne Cohill is a guy who averages like 18, 4, and 5. He could be a huge piece to this team making a deep run, but they also have other really good senior guards and senior forwards who can get boards and play defense. And it's hard to pick a 15 seed to defeat a Tom Izzo team, but who would have thought a St. Peter's team would beat Calipari in the first round and would have beat Purdue in the Sweet 16? I'm rocking with Youngstown State to make it to the Sweet 16 this year and go up against Kansas State in the Sweet 16. Let's go. Okay, next up we do have Purdue versus Kentucky. Zach Edey going up against Oscar Tshiebwe, and I know Purdue has been losing as of late, but I think I still trust them right now at this point to get past the Kentucky team who has been very inconsistent. I also think that Zach Edey would be able to still score a good bit going up against Oscar Tshiebwe. He still has quite the height advantage, quite the size advantage. Give me Purdue here in this one, and Purdue's just been playing like a much better team all season long. I'm taking Purdue over Kentucky in this matchup. Next up, we do have UConn going up against Gonzaga, to another really good big man matchup going with Sanogo matched up against Drew Timme. So that would be really fun to see, and we would get to see 2 really good freshman centers over 7 feet go at it between Donovan Clingan and also Ben Gray there on Gonzaga. That would be great to see, and I ultimately think that Gonzaga might have the advantage in the front court given those matchups, but I think everywhere else I like UConn in this game. If Andre Jackson Jr. is playing at his peak, UConn will win this game. If Jordan Hawkins is shooting lights out, UConn will win this game, and I'm going to have UConn win this game. Move on to face Purdue in the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have Oklahoma State going up against Hofstra in the second round, and I'm gonna have Oklahoma State pull this one off. I think they, a really good veteran team, like I mentioned before. Avery Anderson could be a big factor in this game, put up over 20 points. Give me the Pokes to move on. And next up, we do have Providence going up against Baylor. Now, Providence is the type of team, they play very scrappy, and they could, cause for trouble going up against this Baylor team. But I do think that ultimately Baylor's guards will be able to score enough points in this one where they will be able to get the win and move on past the Friars. So Oh no, we have one more region before our Sweet 16 is set. Okay, one more region. We have Kansas going up against Arkansas here in the second round. And Arkansas, they could cause some trouble here for Kansas. They have a lot of versatile defenders that could be switched on to Jalen Wilson, and that could be, not such a bad thing. And also KJ Adams down there. I think Arkansas actually matches up with them pretty well. And with Nick Smith Jr. coming back, this is an upset that I 100% could see happening. And the last few years, I think the last 4 or 5 years, the defending national champions have lost in either the first or the second round. So, could this become true here for the Kansas Jayhawks in this one? I'm still going to say no. As much as I think Arkansas matches up really well against Kansas, I think it would cause for a really close game, but I'm still going to have Arkansas win, or I'm still going to have Kansas win this game. Man, my inner conscience wants to pick Arkansas so bad in this game that I just keep saying Arkansas, because they do match up really well against them. Like, I think Daquan Harris, as good of a defender as he is, Anthony Black could make some plays. Nick Smith Jr., I think, might, even though Grady Dick is an amazing freshman, when Nick Smith Jr. is playing, I think that he could be better than Grady Dick, especially on the defensive end as well. And then you have all those versatile forwards like Walsh, the Mitchell brothers, that could be switched on Jalen Wilson and defend him really well. And also with KJ Adams and Kevin McCullough, like, Arkansas has the dudes to be able to win this game. And since my conscience wants to pick Arkansas so bad, we are taking our second 1 seed to lose early in the round of 32, and Arkansas is going to move on to the Sweet 16 and make a run. And I like the matchups here. I think Kansas matches up well against a lot of opponents, and you factor that in with the fact that all the defending champions from the last few years have lost first or second round. Give me the Razorbacks to move on and pull off a big-time upset in the second round. Next up, we do have VCU going up against Xavier. Can VCU make it to the second weekend of March, matched up against a very good Xavier team? I'm going to say no. I got Xavier moving on into the Sweet 16. A very good starting 5 on this team, and if Zach Fremantle's back down there with Nunji, that is a really good front court down low. Then you have Solly Boom, Colby Jones, who are really good guards. This Xavier team is legit, and I have them moving past VCU here in round number 2. Next up, we do have Oral Roberts going up against Iowa State, and another amazing matchup. I mean, I think this one could go down to the wire, and Oral Roberts could have a chance to hit like a game winner or something like that, man. They're undefeated in their league. Oral Roberts has been playing amazing basketball as of late. And Iowa State, they could be prone to getting upset, man. They definitely could be prone to getting upset. I'm going to do it. I'm taking Oral Roberts here to move on. I think they have such a good team this year, and they've been dominating their league. I'm taking Oral Roberts University to move past the Cyclones. I think even though Iowa State has a lot of really good guards like Kalitcher, Lipsley, Holmes, I think some of them could struggle in this game, and I'm going to have Oral Roberts move past them here to make the Sweet 16. Next up, we do have Maryland going up against Arizona. That would be a fun matchup. I do think Maryland has some bigs that would be able to slow down Arizona's bigs, but the guard play, Maryland actually is a good matchup for Arizona. I'm not going to lie, but I do think Arizona, even though they match up pretty well, I think Arizona has the more talented team. So I think this one closer than you might think, but Arizona gets the job done. So our Sweet 16 is set, and only 2 1 seeds making it to the Sweet 16. So very, very interesting the way this is turning out. So let's go ahead and get to our Sweet 16 matchups. We do have Memphis going up against Indiana, and I think Trace Davis has a huge game in this one. I think Xavier Johnson is the best defender, guard defender that Kendrick Davis would have seen up to this point in the tournament. And I think Indiana wins this one. It is close, but I'm going to take the Hoosiers to make it back to the Elite Eight. Next up, we do have Virginia going up against UCLA, and this another super fun matchup. Two veteran teams, Tiger Campbell versus Kihei Clark. This one would go down to the wire because I know neither one of those senior guards and these veteran teams want to go home once they make it to the Sweet 16. So I know this one is going down to the wire, and I think I trust Virginia to pull off close games more than I do UCLA. And I think these really good guys like Armand Franklin, who's an X Factor, Jaden Clark, they could slow down Jamie Jaquez and these really good UCLA players. And maybe Ben Vanderplas is the difference maker in this game, being huge off the bench for the Cavs. Virginia is in the Elite Eight. So we have a 3 versus 4 seed matched up in the Elite Eight in that region. So next up, we do have Houston going up against Miami, and I think Houston matches up really well here against Miami. You know, Houston has a lot of length, a lot of defense. They play scrappy, and they have really good defensive guards that can slow down Miami's guards. So unless Miami is really on point, hitting a lot of their shots, I think I trust Houston in this game, and I also think Houston has the front court advantage over Norchad Omier. So I'm going to take Houston to make it to the Elite Eight. Look at them Cougs. Next up, we do have Kansas State going up against Youngstown State. And Youngstown State, as a 15 seed, making it to the second weekend of March Madness. And do they have enough to pull a St. Peter's and be the second ever 15 seed to make it to the Elite Eight? I think this is where their Cinderella story ends, and I'm going to have Kansas State come out and defeat Youngstown State and make it to the Elite Eight. I think, Keontae Johnson has a big game in this one. I think Marquise Noel is going to be dotting them up with the passes. Give me Kansas State in this one. Cam Carter, Sills, big games off the bench. I like Kansas State in this one, using their depth to get past Youngstown State. Next up, we do have Purdue versus UConn. This is a matchup that I need to see in March. I mean, Purdue with Zach Edey and going up against UConn and Sanogo and Klingon. I actually do think UConn matches up really well against Purdue. Like I've said this many times, if UConn and Purdue meet at any point in the tournament, I think UConn matches up really well against them. It's going to come down, in my opinion, to the backcourts between Tristan Newton and Jordan Hawkins going up against Fletcher Lawyer and also Braden Smith. So I think that the backcourts are the difference maker in this game, and I think I'm going to trust UConn and mostly Jordan Hawkins to help get past this very good Purdue team and make it to the Elite Eight. And this one, Purdue goes down in the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. Next up, we do have Oklahoma State going up against Baylor in a Big 12 battle rematch, and we've seen this story already. I think Baylor a much better team than Oklahoma State. I'm going to take Baylor here in this matchup for sure. Oklahoma State's run as an 11 seed to the Sweet 16 ends right there. So far, we'll go ahead and finish this last region here real quick. Next up, we do have Arkansas going up against Xavier in this one. Now, Arkansas, a big surprise up to this point, defeating Kansas as the 1 seed and making it to the Sweet 16. How do they match up against Xavier, though? I think that honestly they match up pretty well again. Nunji could be a tough one to get by here for Xavier or for Arkansas, but this team is going to play hard here, the Razorbacks, and I kind of like the matchup here, but I am going to take Xavier in a very close game. Xavier has been a team to lose a lot of really close games this year, but this one, they get by in a close one and make it to the Elite Eight. Xavier, I think that Zach Fremantle and Nunji might be too much for Arkansas's bigs in this one, and I think that Xavier has the guards to counter their Arkansas's really good guards. Like Xavier has Colby Jones, Solly Boom. Like these are super good players down the stretch of games as well. And I like Xavier to move on to the Elite Eight. All right, our last Sweet 16 matchup, we do have Oral Roberts going up against Arizona. Oral Roberts, can they continue their really good Cinderella run from the 11 seed, defeating Northwestern, defeating Iowa State, now going up against Arizona? It would not be an easy matchup, but I think Oral Roberts actually might not match up that badly against this Arizona team. The only thing I would say is Arizona has some really good guards on that team. Courtney Ramey would not, just be letting Maxi buckets go all over the place and scoring on them. So I do worry about that a little bit. But I do think, Oral Roberts does have a 7'5" guy in Connor Vancouver that I think, is going to be able to guard the paint very well for this Oral Roberts team with guys like Ballo and Turbellis. So it's not going to be an easy one, but I'm taking Oral Roberts to get past Arizona and make it to the Elite Eight. There is still one Cinderella left alive in this bracket. So our Elite Eight is set. We do have 4-seeded Indiana going up against 3-seeded Virginia. We have 1-seeded Houston going up against 3-seeded Kansas State. We have 5-seeded UConn going up against 2-seeded Baylor. And we have 4-seeded Xavier going up against 11-seeded Oral Roberts. So I'm liking the way this has turned out so far in the Elite Eight. So let's get to our matchups to make it to the Final Four. So Indiana versus Virginia. This would be an amazing matchup, and I do think that Virginia actually would play some really good defense on this Indiana team, and especially Trace Jackson Davis. So are they going to be ready for that, and can Trace Jackson Davis overcome that tough defense from guys like Armand Franklin and Jaden Clark? I think that he definitely could and still have a big game, but I think it's going to take a big game from their guards and Jalen Hood-Schifino, Xavier Johnson, and them boys, and Race Thompson. Race Thompson, I think, is the X factor in this game. If Race Thompson has a good game, Indiana wins and makes it to the Final Four, and I'm going to say that Indiana does it and makes it back to the Final Four. Mike Woodson returns as head coach and gets Indiana back here to the Final Four. So next up we do have UConn as our 5 seed going up against Baylor as our 2 seed, and I don't know, guys. I think Baylor doesn't perform that well against really good big men. Like the Big 12, I know it is the best conference in college basketball by far the best conference in college basketball, but there are not that many good centers, like elite centers, in the Big 12 Conference. And I do think going up against guys like Adama Sanogo and also Donovan Clingan might be a little bit too much for guys like Flo Thamba down low. And although Baylor has some really good guards that could keep them in this game and will keep them in this game, and it will be close, I'm taking UConn to get back to the Final Four as well. So next up, we do have Houston going up against Kansas State, our 1 seed versus our 3 seed coming out of this region, and this would be another fantastic matchup. Houston, I think Sasser and Sheed are going to be able to give Marquise Noel like a really good, play an amazing defense on him. And I kind of feel like Marquise Noel could have a Carson Edwards Purdue type of run in him this season. It kind of gives me that feel. He can shoot from long range, and I think he could have a Carson Edwards type game again, when they lost to Virginia, who eventually became the national champions in 2019. It was an amazing game, Purdue versus Virginia in the Elite Eight. That's what this is kind of giving me. It's giving me those vibes, and I'm taking Houston to win, but an amazing effort from Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel in this one. And Marquise Noel makes a huge name for himself, just like Carson Edwards did that year. And they go on a big run to the Elite Eight, but Houston overcomes them and makes it to the Final Four, which is being held and hosted in Houston. So how about them Cougs? Next up, and not to mention Houston, our first and will be our only 1 seed in the Final Four. So next up, our last Elite Eight matchup, we do have Xavier as our 4 seed going up against an 11-seeded Oral Roberts team. And it would be fun to see Vancouver go up against a guy like Nunge, because a guy like Nunge, he can actually stretch the floor pretty well. Like, he can stretch the floor pretty well, so that's going to bring him out of the paint some, and allow Zach Fremantle and company to work down low. So that's where I worry about that, and I also think that Xavier just matches up super well, like guard-wise. They're going to be able to handle maxi buckets there, but this Oral Roberts team, undefeated in their league, it is not just max. They have a lot of really good players on this team, and I am taking Oral Roberts to go to the Final Four. Let's lock it in. I know they are, they're going to be underdogs, probably against Northwestern, probably against Iowa State, probably against Arizona, probably against Xavier. But I do think it is possible for them to beat these teams, especially at least to make to the Sweet 16. And it's fun to let them go to the Final Four. And I know Xavier fans, Arizona fans, you'll let me know that there's no way you guys would lose to Oral Roberts, but anything can happen in March. And it is fun to have a Cinderella make the Final Four. So that is what we're doing right here. So we have an 11-seeded Oral Roberts in the Final Four. And they are going up against the Houston Cougars, who are a stacked team. And I think that's where I have to cross the line for Oral Roberts. It is rare for an 11-seeded to get to the Final Four, and when they do, they usually do end up losing in the Final Four game. So I do think Houston is going to get past them and make it to the national championship game. Next up, we have a super fun matchup between Indiana and UConn. Which one of these really good teams, most would consider these two programs blue blood programs, who haven't been all that great, in recent years. They've had their good teams, but, haven't been to the Final Four stage. And, at least, UConn, they won championship in 2014, around that time. So this would be an amazing matchup. Who's going to get back to the Natty, either UConn or Indiana? TJD, been talking about him this whole video on this run, going up against Sanogo and Klingen down low. There has been some amazing center matchups throughout this tournament. This one might be the best one on the biggest stage as well. And I do think Jordan Hawkins and Tristan Newton going up against Jalen Hood-Schifino and Xavier Johnson would be an amazing matchup. Reese Thompson and Andre Jackson Jr., a great matchup there as well. But a guy I haven't mentioned yet, Caravan, the freshman power forward there on UConn. He could also have a big game in this one and help this UConn team get past a very tough Indiana team and make it to the national championship. So you guys know that I've been big fans of UConn and Houston making it far in the tournament all year long, and I'm really feeling these teams, guys. I'm trusting my gut on this one, and this has been a really fun one. We had a fun run with Oral Roberts. We had some really good matchups throughout these regions, some good upsets like Hofstra over Tennessee. We had Youngstown State in the Sweet 16 defeating Texas and Michigan State. We had Kansas State with a Marquise Noel unbelievable run to the Elite Eight, a Carson Edwards type performance every game in the tournament, and a lot of fun. So many good storylines, and that's what I like to do for these predictions. Not only predict who I think is going to win or lose, but kind of intertwine the storylines that, you know, could possibly happen in real life. So that's kind of like how I like to base my predictions around, because that's what's fun for me. And it all comes down to this: UConn Houston National Championship, April that says April 4th, but that was last year's. I don't know which day it's on, but around April in Houston. Who is going to run away with this one? And we are going to break down these matchups right here. Let's start with the backcourt. Who do we think has the advantage here in the backcourt? Houston, they got Jamal Sheed, Marcus Sasser. They also have guys like Mark that comes in. They have a pretty good backcourt on their hands, and I do think that Sasser is going to have an amazing tournament to get them here to this point. UConn's hands, they do have Jordan Hawkins, who I believe if they get to this point, Jordan Hawkins is going to solidify himself as one of the best shooters in the country and just be an amazing player throughout the tournament. Tristan Newton, who has, you know, upside of getting like around like 12, 5, and 5 every game. Like, Tristan Newton is a beast, all-around type of player. He can play defense as well. I would probably say Houston has the slight advantage on the backcourt part. On the front court part, you got guys like Roberts. You got guys like Jarris Walker. Some really good players here in the front court for Houston, but I definitely got to go with the front court advantage here for UConn. They got guys like Caravan, Sanogo, Klingen off the bench. Really good players here. But I do feel like Houston defensively is the better team in this one, and I do think for UConn to get to the national championship, Andre Jackson Jr. will have to put on some amazing performances. But I think once he gets to the national championship and he's going up against these really good defenders like Roberts, like Sasser even, it's going to be tough for him. And I think he has a bad game in this one, because this is where we see, you know, UConn, they've been really good all year, but every once in a while, you know, they just look like, man, what happened to this team? I think that happens in the national championship. UConn collapses along with a bad performance by Andre Jackson Jr. And, you know, a low-scoring game. Houston wins. Both teams score in the 50s. And Houston are your 2023 national champions and win the championship in Houston, in their city, and they win for the first time since the 80s. Back when they had the beast himself, Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. So that is going to do it for this week's March Madness bracket predictions. These are always so much fun to make for you guys. I hope they're fun to watch for you guys. And let me know who are your guys' favorites to win the Natty. And if you want to, let me know, based on this bracket, who would be your guys' final four. And make sure you guys subscribe, because we're going to have an updated version of this every single week coming out here on the channel. And not only that, but we have daily college basketball March Madness coverage here on the channel. So hit that like button if you guys enjoy, hit that sub button, and yeah guys, thank you so much for watching.